everybody, this is Geronimo from the Beyond Taboo podcast, and I'm here with Dr. Rufus. How are you doing, Dr. Rufus?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to talk about anything and everything that falls under the sun. It could be taboo, it could be not taboo, but my excitement for being here is this is something I've been thinking about, and it's an exciting podcast, so I'm ready to rock and roll.
Oh, thanks. Many thanks for being here. Do you prefer Rufus, Tony? Or any nicknames?
No, I would just say I always tell people it's whatever your flavor is. So I would say, but most people call me Tony. Those are what my friends call me.
Okay, I'll rather go with Tony then. Tony is a sex therapist and certified sexologist. He's the founder of the Libido Health app.
Yep.
And I think that's a very intriguing topic for me. You know, Tony, you could have chosen to build or found any other fitness tracker, but you went for libido. So I'm already curious about that. What's going on with libido these days? Because I'm sure you pinpointed that for a reason. So why?
Right. Well, that's a good question, and I'm about to satisfy your curiosity here. And the reason for that is I practice sex therapy, and I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years. And as a sex therapist, oftentimes my clients will come in and start talking about their, the sexual parts, their loins, and focusing or hyper-focusing on sexual performance, and then asking okay, doc, what's wrong? Why am I not still performing well? And I've done all the tricks and techniques, and I find that I'm ready to go and that my partner stimulates me and I'm highly sexually motivated. And so when they start telling me about their eating habits and they start telling me about their life and their stress at work and all the social political issues going on, just like every other thing that's happening in their life besides what's happening in the bed, I realize as a sex therapist, I could talk about technique and I can talk about the social emotional issues and other issues that impact somebody's life, like trauma, and bring it all the way to present day. But there's so many things that happen in real time in somebody's life that can impact their libido. And so I was very curious about okay, how do I find out or create something that helps somebody with their overall sexual energy, which is the libido. And so what I did is I looked at, what are all the things that impact somebody's libido? So that's nutrition, that's how somebody has a lifestyle. So that could be the amount of sleep that you're getting. That's the fitness that you have in your life. That's how you just take care of your social emotional wellness. And so I started looking at all the factors that when in therapy, these clients were always telling me, these are the other issues. And I realized that, hey, the other issues that are outside of the bedroom, outside of somebody's sexual life, are having a major impact. They're like what we call a moderating variable. It impacts on how somebody's performed. And so what I did is I was like, okay, there's a space for this. We need to focus on how somebody can protect their libido, increase the libido, or just maintain a healthy libido. And that's where the Libido app came from, and the Libido Health company created itself based on my experience as a sex therapist, working with clients and realizing that oftentimes clients will talk about erectile dysfunction. They'll talk about the issues within the bed and intimacy, but not realizing that their food, their diet, their stress, all these other things were impacting their sex. And what I wanted to do is support clients in maintaining a healthy libido by addressing those issues. And that's what we do in the Libido app and as a company.
That makes certainly a fair point. You sort of, I like how you sort of mark in general health or sexual health with the libido tab or concept. Like if it was our general fuel, sexual fuel, because it is actually, but it's not so frequent for me to hear picturing libido as a major thing, for example, or I don't know, point to approach when it comes, for example, to erectile dysfunction.
It's interesting, oftentimes libido is not centered, that sexual energy is not centered in conversations. And what happens is, we look at other opportunities such as erectile dysfunction medication. We look at other things like toys, which are fine, because I'll be the first one to tell my client, okay, you might need to look at erectile dysfunction medication we might need to talk to your practitioner, or you might need to see if there's other opportunities out there, as we know that there's pumps and other things to help with erectile dysfunction, even injections. And so I'm not opposed to that. If I start with trying to see how do we work with your libido? How do we work with things naturally? If we're finding that that's not working, we're all fine with saying like, okay, here's a medical practitioner, here's how you address that. Because even in the Libido app, we work with a national network of medical providers. So we realize that erectile dysfunction may be something beyond just the libido, and we want to look at medication as well or other alternatives. But you're right. Oftentimes people don't talk about the sexual energy because sometimes thinking about energy seems like, oh, that's very hippie, very fufushishi. Is that really real? But the reality is, yes, I talk to clients all the time that say, I'm too tired for sex. I'm too stressed out from sex. My job is stressing me out. My partner would like sex, but I'm not in a sexual place. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You have to be ready for sex. You have to be primed for it. You have to be in the mood for it. And if you're not in the mood, or your body's not actually responding to that, we need to figure out what's blocking that. And it could be all the things I just mentioned or something else. But one, I like to start with what is the natural, what's going on in your life. And if we find that that's not the case and it's something else, we want to look at either medical assistance or any other assistance that gets somebody's libido to get revved up, because that could be the same for male or female identified bodies. There's things out there that can actually get male and female bodies primed for sexual intercourse.
Makes sense, definitely. And Tony, while you were saying this got me thinking I'm sort of feeling or better understanding from the perspective you're bringing to the table today that, well, maybe we picture libido just as, well, the fire within, when it's actually a little bit more complex. And I'm guessing it sort of encapsulates a general emotional, psychological state, after all. And so I guess it's actually a great, you could say, parameter to sort of evaluate your sexual health in a sense. So I like that.
I like that you're getting it too, because it's nice when you have conversation with folks and people are responding well to it, because it's really important for us to, as not just as a company, but I think as human beings, to realize that our mood, our psychological energy, our social emotional functionings, all this is encapsulated in our bodies. That's mind, body, and spirit. And oftentimes we don't think about that because we have all these other things going on in life, from work, or we have our families, we have traffic, we have, everything else that you can think of. So a lot of that is blocking if we think about sexual energy, because it is not something that's put on the forefront. It's actually oftentimes least talked about, sexual energy, but we all have sex, or our body goes through a natural state of cycling through our sexual state, if you will, as females go through an ovulation period, men go through an actual period of going through a sexual cycle, 24 hours. And so we're experiencing it, we have it, but oftentimes it's not something that we focus on or think about. But if we think about thousands of years ago, or just looking at some of the ancient texts that folks have had around the world, people have been talking about sexual energy for a while. It's just now that we have a lot of this westernized information going on and functioning, is that we at least talk about it like the way that we should.
Yeah, you're right about that. We usually sort of relate to abruptly libido or sexual energy with, maybe two spiritual things. I mean, it's pretty much like we were allergic, to our spirituality,
Yeah.
And, I was thinking, libido, I guess that carries its own struggles for men and for women, because the sole concept of libido already carries a set of social demands, like, and I guess that's a struggle for men and for women in terms of, okay, I'm a man, so I should have a high libido, so like a sort of pressure, in difficulty to accept that, well, life has its ups and downs, and we can always be, like in the mood for partying in a sense.
Yeah, you know what? To be honest with you, Geronimo, I find that men are more focused and maybe more in tune with libido because of society and social pressures, where women, they have a libido, but it's maybe least talked about amongst them because societal stereotypes and norms and even pressures to maybe even not show that they have a sexual appetite. But we're uncovering that. And I think in what's going on now in today's society, it's being championed where women should talk about if you have sexual desire, just sexual pleasure. It shouldn't just be in spaces where it's hidden, but it's brought out into the light. And we're still coming to reconciliation with that, I believe.
Yeah,
People
for
still
sure.
moving there. But what I will say to what you're saying is, for men, there's a lot of pressure on saying I have to have stamina. I need to have a sexual appetite. I need to be able to please my partner. And I will say this, the way that I look at libido, I rate it from a scale from 1 to 10. And some guys will say I'm at a 10 and some will say I'm at a 2. The way we look at it at Libido Health is that if you're at a healthy 2, 2's fine. If you're at a 10 and you feel healthy about that, that's fine. But I will say this is the caveat that having sometimes a high libido could correlate that you might have some stress in your life or other pressures. Now that may sound
interesting.
weird
That's
or
interesting.
advantageous, right? It is very interesting. But what we find is that some people, if they're doing certain things like masturbating a lot, you feel like you're having a lot of sex, and you feel like you need to have a lot of sex in your life or masturbating, sometimes that may be compensating for stress in your life or compensating for other things that you might be feeling in your life. And so what I would say is you may want to look into that because you might find yourself masturbating at times that maybe you shouldn't, might be desiring at sex often, and you're curious on where that could be coming from. That could be coming from a place that is impacting your libido and causing it to be high as a way of compensating for the experience in your life. Now, if that's all rolled out and you just have a high libido or you have a high sex drive, there's nothing wrong with that. Oftentimes society may shame and say, okay, you're very hypersexual, you like sex all the time. And so I would say just be careful of feeling shamed if you know that there's nothing wrong with how your sex is happening and where it's coming from. I would say find sexual partners or find somebody that matches that sexual appetite, or find yourself finding how you want to take care of that sexual appetite. But the main thing I would say is be safe while you're doing that. Yeah.
Well, no, so sorry. Now that you bring the concept of shame, I was just going to nudge us back to the whole concept of, or the whole idea of, the differences between women and men when it comes to libido. And you just brought the concept of shame, which I actually think it's actually quite self-explanatory when it comes to understanding, how genders in people relate with libido itself. I mean, because there's a whole set of cultural scripts that tell us what's right or wrong when it comes to how we feel, actually. So, yeah, I feel like you were really on point with what you said about, women speaking up in, reconnecting with desire when history has taught us that, self-pleasure is something you should step away from, and not just for women, for men too. So I feel like that's a very important point of the discussion.
It is. Religious texts may say, how improper it is, historical context, even psychologically, how it was looked at as masturbation or self-pleasuring, as looking at something that could be considered abnormal or wrong, and what were the alternatives to address that. But I think through sexual liberation, sexual freedom, folks are getting more in tune with that. But what I find is even after sexual liberation and freedom, people really don't know how to really tap into that. We still find that you have porn, you have sex stores, you have all these places that you can go to maybe encourage sexual pleasure. But oftentimes I find that still, once people step away from pleasure conversations or spaces that are encouraging pleasure, even if it's anecdotal, people still find that it's something that they're pretty ashamed about or don't want to talk about, but we all know that it's happening. People are doing it. It's just a natural function. And that's where even at Libido Health, we're trying to champion that conversation and get people to think about it, not just as pleasure, but part of your total wellness. And so our motto, our theme is always talking about bridging the gap between sexual health and total wellness. And the point of that is, we know that people vacillate on the gambit scale of that. So you have people that might be really sexually in tune with kink, BDSM, whips and chains and all that good stuff. And then you have some other folks that are very closeted about their sexual health. And so what we don't want to do is just go far left or far right. We want to try to meet people in the middle where we can encourage those that may be in the closet about their sexual health to figure out more about what that looks like for them and be freer about it. And then for those that may be on the farther end of kinky and BDSM, how do they continue that and enjoy their sexual play and be safe about it as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, actually. And I guess there must be great synergies when it comes to, well, people learning from each other and those type of interactions in what everyone brings to the table, and sparking curiosity. So I feel like that's a great approach to how you propose health to people, actually. So, Tony, you mentioned that you were sort of identifying this pattern, which pushed you to the idea of the Libido Health Hub. Mm-hmm. And I guess it might be difficult to pinpoint one, since you mentioned a couple of multiple factors. Mm-hmm. But when you look at your data at clinics, what picture shows up first? Is it like sleep, stress, meds, hormones, or either the logics itself of relationships? I would say hormones also, because there's a lot of discussions, I feel, at the moment, with clinics promising testosterone for everything. So I'd be very interested in hearing about your perspective.
Well, thank you for asking that. So there are a gambit of things, but I perceive from my conversations and what is here in the United States is what we deal with. We deal with a lot of stress, and stress is a silent killer. Cortisol that is just left in the body, which is that enzyme that is released during like anxiety, fight or flight, just those experiences that we get from every day. And if you think about like work, if you think about traffic, if you think about paying your bills, you think about having to deal with anxiety, whatever that may be coming from, if it's trauma or if it's, you don't know if, where the next paycheck is coming from. I find that oftentimes with my clients, they deal with a lot of stress. Now, stress may not be the only variable or the only culprit to what's going on, but I find that what is a through line, something that's very consistent in a lot of my clients, it is stress. And now, will that impact with erectile dysfunction? Does that impact somebody self-lubricating? Does that impact somebody actually having blood flow to the penis? Maybe not. But at the same time, if somebody is too stressed, not in the mood for sex, or too stressed and becoming hypersexual, those are what I tend to look at as a bigger variable. Now, erectile function and all the other things that dysfunction, that all these things that may still happen could be leading to hormones and testosterone or estrogen levels in women. But I do find that across most conversations that I have with clients, it boils down to a level of stress. Now, where the stress may come from, it may come from their relationship. Their partner may be stressing them out. It may be a mother-in-law. It may be, whatever is going on in the world, like politics.
Life.
Yeah, just life, right? And capital LIFE, right? And so because of that, that's what I find. But I don't.
Okay, that's the first domino. Perfect.
Yes, that's the first domino. And I would say once you get past that, you might peel back the onion and find that there's other things. But yeah, life and stress, it seems to be one of the biggest culprits.
Well, you mentioned once you go past that. So now that talking in terms of the Libido Health app, how do you structure plans or programs or the steps forward for someone to meet their well-being in a sense? Like, is there any small, like the small like habits that you have seen work, or for example, do you tell guys, okay, I don't know, if you do this for 12 weeks, okay, you'll get to X point, or how do you see, or how do you structure actually, the path to well-being when it comes to the logics, the dynamics of the Libido Health app? I mean, I guess there's reminders, I guess, any plans, programs. So how does that actually work?
Yeah, so as a therapist, I designed the Libido app to also have providers. So there's certified sex therapists, mental health therapists, sex coaches, relationship coaches, health coaches. So you will meet with somebody in real time if you desire that. You can set up an appointment. And when you do that, I say, for an example, and one of the therapists that you could meet if you sign up with me, if you're meeting with me, and this is something that we have standard across the board, I'm going to create a treatment plan, and it's going to be based on whatever you say. So if you're having issues around having early ejaculation, I'm going to talk about like, what are the issues? What's going on in your life? Once I get an assessment on like, okay, these are the issues that you have going on in your life. It's not just stress. It's not just the workplace environment. It's also that you've always had issues with early ejaculation, and you need some techniques to work on early ejaculation. If that's the case, I'm going to talk about Kegel exercises. I'm going to talk about practicing masturbation, which allows for you to delay your, ejaculation and practice through that process. So with certified sex therapists, we use a level of techniques as well as looking at social emotional factors. So I'm going to explore, how are things going on in your life? What was your history? Was there any trauma, any other experience around sexual health? But then once I realize that, okay, this is based solely on you always being early with ejaculation, and you're noticing that you want to change that a little bit, I'm going to talk about, one, naturally ejaculation is not early or late, if you will. It's just a natural part that we don't go on for hours, unlike what society may tell us.
That's true.
Right, that you need to go on for hours. No, it's typically you're going to have so many minutes if you're having a rhythmic sex that it's just going to happen. But if you're thinking about still you're too early, or you're lasting less than maybe a minute, then we can talk about how to extend that. But there is the layer itself. I'm looking at creating a treatment plan, figure out if I need to diagnose you with anything like anxiety, which anxiety is a big trigger behind a lot of our sexual dysfunction. And then after that, if I find that there's nothing else that's impacting you, and I'm addressing the anxiety or stress or whatever other variables are, and I find that still it just needs to be technique and practice, I'm going to give you homework. And I'm going to say you need to practice masturbating using a Kegel exercise and trying to attempt to delay your ejaculation to see if we can lengthen the time. So that would be an entire experience if I was
that doesn't sound too bad, actually,
Yeah, I would say all the training that we get to do this, we really try to narrow in and laser in on what's happening social emotionally first. But if that's still where we need to do some techniques or some other things like medication, we start to move in that direction as well.
So I guess what I'm understanding is pretty much every journey is quite bespoke in a sense. But I guess also considering this widespread pattern of stress and anxiety, and though for sure there are always individual differences and individual issues and struggles, but it's talking about techniques. If you, let's say, for example, finish this sentence, how would you say it could end? Like, most men would feel better in 30 days if they...
I think most men would feel better in 30 days if they could probably have a delayed ejaculation and probably last longer and be harder or often. And I think that's just really where men are at. I think we have a hyper focus, or men have a hyper focus on their penis, and having a longer or a delayed ejaculation and a stronger erection. And I totally understand that. I mean, if you think about our performance, it really is about, being able to use our penis in a way that brings pleasure to whoever and however we're having a sexual act, even if that's masturbating alone. But I do find that, that's where most of my conversation with men come around. It's around sexual performance around the penis.
Well, that makes complete sense, actually. And so, in a sense, I'm guessing or getting actually that for most men or for most of us to actually feel better when it comes to sex and our own sexual confidence, we should definitely start befriending Kegels and conscious masturbation, probably, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, one, starting with yourself and that Kegel exercises or Kegels, and then also looking at your penis and getting in tune with it and getting in tune with your own self-pleasure will help you when you start having pleasure with other folks. If you're rushing through and you're masturbating and maybe you're rushing through it, or if you're masturbating and it's rough, that's something that we have to be conscious about, because when we start being with our partners, maybe they don't want it rough. Maybe, they want slow strokes, and, the pleasure by yourself, you might be masturbating just to get the ejaculation, to have your orgasm. And so oftentimes when we're starting very young, watching porn or whatever experience we have, by the time we're doing that, we've kind of trained ourselves to then, by the time we get with the partner, it's like, oh, this is what we think it's supposed to be. Or this is how I like to come. So I like to have an orgasm. And then the partner's like, nah, that's not going to do it for me. This is how I like it. Or they're not feeling pleasured and they're bringing it up to, or maybe you're getting off and you're getting pleasured and they're not. So yeah, it really does come back to how do you train your body? How do you practice that? And to be honest with you, maybe you're fine with how you're coming. Maybe you're fine with your orgasm and how you masturbate. That's totally fine. I find oftentimes people don't come to me or have a complaint or try to address something unless their partner is having a complaint. Usually if you're having an orgasm by yourself and you're enjoying it and you're coming, most likely you're not going to complain that you did. You're not going to be like,
interesting, actually.
2 hours. You're like, I did what I needed to do and I enjoyed it. But when you have a partner that's like, yeah, you did what you need to do, you enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it. That's when people start becoming more self-conscious and think about, okay, I might need to get some help around this.
When someone else enters the picture, things start to pop up. Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Definitely. Tony, I'm already curious about trying the app. So I'll definitely make sure we add the link so guys can give it a try and find their own way to, their best well-being, actually. Sounds like very great, a great approach to health. So thanks for sharing your perspective. If you're open to this, I'd love to wrap up and close our conversation with one last question.
Sure.
Now that we're talking about common beliefs, and what usually your clients, what usually men bring to your consultations, you must, hear or identify some common patterns. You touch on those already through our conversation. But if there's one belief about masculinity in sex you wish we would retire in our lifetime, what would that be?
I think it's ultimately how we perform sex. I feel like men, and some of this comes from watching porn. It comes from men sharing stories about how they pleasure a woman and how a man has to show up in bed and how a man should, perform sexually. And oftentimes it has very little to do with romance, love, intimacy, slow, passionate sex. And I find that when men try to take what they either think sex is supposed to be, or men learn from places where sex shows it to be very pornographic, very where these people are actors or they're acting out sex, and it seems like, okay, the woman or the person, because this would be woman or man, the way that I'm showing up with them, you're supposed to enjoy it like this. And then when you get with somebody or you're with your sexual partner and you realize that, no, I don't want to have rough sex. I don't want to feel like I'm this way or that way. There's times where I do want it to be passionate. I want it to be sensual. I find that sometimes men feel like that takes them out of this very machismo, masculine, dominant personality. And it makes them feel like it's less of a man at times because there's not this persona or archetype or character that we think that we're supposed to be. I wish men would be more sensual and sexual and pleasurable to their partners, because if you're trying to get that person to have an orgasm or to come, there's maybe a lot more that's going to happen instead of having hard penetrative sex. You know, again, that probably comes from masturbation. That probably comes from watching porn. That probably comes from one guy sharing to another guy, this is how I please this person. And
That's true.
And then the reality, it's, you know what? People are looking for that intimate moment because the biology of it is that we can all have sex in that kind of perspective, but taking it out of a place of where it's just reproduction and ejaculation and sperm and egg, that's where you take it from that and you turn it into pleasure, romance, sensuality, touching, caressing, kissing, making love. And I find that a lot of people aren't doing that. A lot of people are just having sex, which is fine. But I find that a lot of people are wanting romance and not getting it.
Well, that's actually gold. All the things you have just said, and I totally agree with all that you said. I couldn't be more I think just like you. I mean, when you think about it, we really need to observe where we are building our confidence in. After all, like you said, I mean, after all, I mean, it's all about pleasure, and we should focus on pleasure in communicating, because that's the path. Actually, sure, there's knowledge and techniques and tips or whatever, but I guess the most all-proof formula might be just get to know the other and what they actually like. So
yes,
thanks for sharing your perspective.
You're totally welcome. And thank you for asking that question. Yeah, if you slow down, take time to enjoy it, you know, enjoy the moment, enjoy sexual play, and, you know, get to know what the other person wants and also get to know what you want, maybe at the same time.
Exactly. Couldn't be more. Yeah, I totally agree. So, Tony, I appreciate you a lot. Thanks for bringing your expertise, your perspective. I really like it. I like a lot the idea, the concept of the Libido Health app. So, guys, if you like this conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop your comments if you have any questions. If something resonated with you throughout the conversation, and below you'll find the links to the Libido Health app. And if you have any questions for Tony, you just let us know. Thanks for watching us. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks, Tony, for being here.
You're very welcome. No problem.
Take care.
Take care.
Nice.